I left him the night I realized I loved him. Not because he pushed me away. He didn't. Not because I was afraid of him. But because I wasn't sure I belonged in a life that suddenly felt real. If you've ever loved quietly, left without closure, or come back for something deeper, then stay with me. Like this video, and subscribe for more stories that know what it means to love in silence, and to be loved anyway. I left on a night when the wind felt heavier than silence. There was no suitcase in my hand, no final word, no pleading voice behind me. Only the rustle of dry leaves against the stone walkway of the Hale estate, and the soft knock of my boots with each careful step toward the gate. I held my coat closed with one hand, and the gentle swell of my stomach with the other. Not visible yet, but there, quietly existing like so many of the truths I never dared to say aloud. In my pocket was a letter, handwritten on cream-colored paper. No salutation, no signature, just one line, barely more than a whisper. I chose you, but maybe you were never meant to know that. I laid it on the old wooden bench by the side window of his study. The light from inside spilled faintly onto the grass, gold and blurred like a half-forgotten dream. Somewhere deep in that room, he was probably still awake. Still bent over contracts, numbers, legacies. He wouldn't notice the letter tonight. Or maybe ever. A breeze slipped beneath my collar, sharp with the scent of the white chrysanthemums I had tended all summer. That scent. It reminded me of one quiet evening, weeks ago, when he walked up behind me in the garden. No words, no instructions. Just a light tug of my shawl as he placed it gently over my shoulders. His hand had lingered, warm and unsure. His eyes, when I turned, were no longer made of steel. That was the moment I began to fall in love with him, and that was when I realized I had to leave. There's something cruel about timing. Love doesn't come when you deserve it. It comes when you're least ready. Like winter's first chill when you've just started hoping for spring. People would say I was forced into this marriage, that I was sold to a man twice my worth to save a dying family, that my father signed my life away before he passed, leaving only debt and obligation. But the truth? I signed the contract. Me. With full knowledge and both hands steady, no one made that choice for me. No man forced it on me. The number was given. The need was desperate. My mother's medical bills were mounting. My little brother had outgrown his shoes again. So I signed, and I walked into a marriage that looked like stone. Cold, unmoving, quiet. Jonathan Hale was not cruel. He was disciplined, measured. A man made more of rules than blood. He lived in logic, in systems, in agreements. Even our wedding was more notarized than celebrated. We lived under the same roof for 4 months. We never slept in the same room. He spoke to me only at dinner. Every request came through his assistant. And yet, the night I collapsed in the hallway from exhaustion, he didn't call anyone. He lifted me himself, carried me to my bed, sat beside me, silent, while a cold cloth lay across my forehead and the storm thrashed outside. When I woke, I saw him holding a cup of tea, not handing it to me, just holding it, as if unsure what to do next. That was the first time he said something that didn't feel rehearsed. "If you ever need to leave," he murmured, "just leave a sign. I won't stop you." I wanted him to stop me, but he didn't. And now, when he had begun to change, when the notes started appearing next to my breakfast tray, when he started remembering how I liked my tea, when his eyes softened without meaning, I became the one walking away. That's the part no one will understand. I didn't take anything with me, except an old sketch of a wedding dress I'd drawn when I was 12. It was folded between the pages of my mother's recipe book. I used to imagine designing gowns. I used to believe in lace and laughter and first dances. The sketch was never finished, just like the collar of that dream dress, left half embroidered with a single strand of white silk thread. I left the actual dress hanging in the closet at Hale Manor. The one I had sewn myself, piece by piece, while pretending it would one day mean something more. I didn't take it with me, because I never really wore it. Not in the way that mattered. My childhood home was still standing. Paint chipping, lights dim, but the porch swing still creaked with the wind the way it always did. Stopped before the front door, unsure of whether to knock or just breathe. Inside, my mother would be asleep. My brother, maybe dreaming of something far from worry. I stood there and wondered, if he read the letter, would he come after me? I knew the answer. Jonathan Hale wasn't the kind of man who chased, and I wasn't the kind of woman who needed to be chased. Not anymore. I didn't want pity, or penance, or promises scrawled in gold. I just wanted to be seen, not as a contract fulfilled, not as a part of his orderly world, but as a woman who had quietly chosen him, without reason or reward. He would never know. But I did, and sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. A promise in silence doesn't need to be spoken. It's the kind you live. Like a heartbeat you don't hear, but always feel. People think it's the signature that binds you, but the truth is, by the time you pick up the pen, your soul has already agreed. It was late March when I first saw the contract. The pages smelled of ink and the edge of desperation. A man in a navy suit had come to the house with his leather briefcase and smooth, emotionless tone. "It's a clean arrangement," he said. "No expectations, just protection. Your mother keeps her home, your brother stays in school, and Mr. Hale gets a wife." I didn't say yes. Not at first. I poured tea instead. The way Mama used to. Black, with a drop of honey and nothing more. I sat in silence and stared at the window while spring tried its best to arrive outside. The man waited. Patient. Paid for his tea with a nod and a line about duty. When he left, he handed me the envelope and said, "This stays between you and Mr. Hale." I placed it on the table and didn't touch it for 3 days. Mama was in her room, breathing shallow. Noah had grown quieter, but still tried to smile every time I passed. The pantry was half full. The roof still leaked. And on the third night, as the thunder rolled over the hills and I wiped water from the kitchen floor, I realized something. We were running out of time. Not money. Not options. Not air. Just time. And that's always the cruelest of all. So I sat down at the table. The house was silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the pulse in my wrist. I opened the envelope and read every word. It was colder than I expected. Marriage by agreement. Term, 1 year. No public disclosure unless mutually agreed. No physical obligations. Spousal support post-dissolution optional. It wasn't a marriage, it was a transaction. But I signed. Not because I wanted the money, not because I was curious about the man, and certainly not because I believed in some hidden romance waiting in a mansion made of glass and mirrors. I signed because Mama deserved rest, because Noah deserved a childhood, because sometimes love for others means letting go of the life you thought you'd have. I told Mama the truth, at least the part she could carry. "It's a marriage," I said softly, holding her hand. "Not one like you and Dad had, but it's safe." She looked at me for a long time. Her eyes tired, but too wise to be fooled. "Safe and good aren't always the same, Grace," she whispered. Then she squeezed my fingers as if saying, "But I know you've already chosen." She never asked what kind of man he was. That night, I went to Noah's room and sat by his bed. He was sketching some kind of spaceship. "Are you going to live far away?" he asked, blinking. "Not too far," I smiled. "Just a big house with a boring view. You'd hate it." He grinned. "Maybe. But if they have a dog, I might come visit." 2 weeks later, a car came to pick me up. Not a limo. Just a black sedan with seats that smelled like leather and silence. The driver handed me a folder. Inside was a one-way plane ticket, a non-disclosure agreement, and a schedule. I read it once, then looked out the window. Vermont blurred by in patches of green and thawing gray. I held tight to my coat. It was the same one I'd wear months later, the night I left. I didn't have a better one, and maybe, somewhere inside me, I knew I wouldn't be staying long enough to need more. Jonathan Hale met me at the entrance of his estate, not with flowers, not even with a smile. Just a nod. He didn't speak as he opened the front door. Just held it open and gestured inside like I was another delivery. The house was breathtaking, cold, clean, high ceilings, quiet light, and the echo of a home without memory. "You'll stay in the East Wing," he said. "Meals are scheduled. You're not expected to attend events. This is a formality, not a union." His voice wasn't cruel, just trained, like a man who had learned that emotions were weaknesses best locked in the basement. I nodded. I didn't expect warmth. I had signed away the right to expect anything. That night, I sat in my new room and stared at the wedding ring they had placed in a velvet box. Simple silver. No inscription, no story. I held it in my palm and remembered my mother's hands. Her rings worn thin from years of kneading dough, holding babies, folding laundry. Her love had calluses. Mine had a contract. I wrote her a letter before bed. "I'm okay. The house is quiet. He is distant, but not unkind. I have everything I need." And I meant it, because I had chosen this, with my own hands, with my own name. And if nothing else, I would make it mean something. Sometimes we sign not because we believe in what's written, but because we believe someone we love shouldn't have to. The first night passed like fog, quiet, without shape. I didn't expect him to come to my room. We had made no vows, only a contract, a set of terms. That didn't include warmth or welcome, but even so, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too large, the sheets too crisp, smelling faintly of cedar and something colder, like paper and distance. I lay there listening to the house breathe, the subtle hum of the heater, the wind moving through glass. Somewhere in the West Wing, he slept, or perhaps didn't. I turned onto my side and stared at the faint outline of a wedding dress hanging in the closet. The staff had insisted I wear something appropriate for the ceremony earlier that day. I had refused. It didn't feel like a wedding, and I wouldn't pretend it was. We signed our names under a chandelier. That was it. He had offered me his arm, not to hold, but to guide. Like you would an employee. "Is this enough?" he'd asked. "It will have to be," I had answered. We didn't exchange rings. Only glances. His unreadable. Mine reluctant. The photographer took one picture. We didn't smile. And now, in the silence of my assigned wing, I realized I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of vanishing, of becoming invisible in someone else's home, of being forgotten, even while still living inside someone's walls. The next morning, I rose early. The windows looked out over frost-covered grass, the kind that cracked beneath footfalls. I made tea in the small kettle tucked in the corner of the room. There was no sugar, no lemon, just the bitterness of something hot. Held in cold hands, I stood by the window sipping slowly. When I turned, I saw something I hadn't noticed the night before. A small framed sketch pinned to the wall, a house, a woman standing by a window, alone. I stepped closer. The lines were sharp, precise, like someone had drawn it to remember something. Or someone. Had he placed this here on purpose? I didn't know. But I stared at it for a long time. We spoke again that evening. Dinner was served in the smaller dining room. I was told by the housekeeper that Mr. Hale prefers informal settings when not hosting. I stepped into the room unsure if I was a guest, a resident, or something in between. He was already seated, reading something on his tablet. He looked up briefly when I entered. Nodded once. "Grace," Jonathan. That was it. The meal was quiet, delicious but clinical, like everything else here. Roasted chicken, wild rice, steamed asparagus, all plated like art but tasting faintly of distance. Halfway through, I asked, "Do you always eat like this?" He didn't look up. Like what? Alone. Perfect. Predictable. He paused then. Not long, but enough to let the question sink in. It's efficient. I nodded. Took another bite. And lonely? He looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time since the signing. His eyes weren't unkind. Just tired, guarded. Lonely is a feeling, not a state of being. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Lonely is a feeling. What a strange thing to say from a man who built a life designed to keep feelings out. I left my room after midnight, not to find him. Just to walk. The house was quiet. The lights dimmed low for night mode. I moved past the library, past the parlor where the piano sat untouched, and into the gallery hallway where old oil portraits hung like ghosts. I stopped at one. It was of a woman, not young, not old, with eyes that mirrored his, sharp, a little sad. A brass plate read, Elaine Hale, 1960-1999. His mother, perhaps? A flicker of something twisted in my chest. The kind of ache that didn't belong to you, but you carried anyway, out of shared human weight. I reached out and touched the frame. Couldn't sleep either. I turned. He stood at the end of the hall, shirt sleeves rolled, barefoot, hair, mussed like he'd wrestled with his thoughts instead of pillows. I straightened instinctively, but he didn't move closer. He just leaned against the wall and watched me. She used to stand there too, he said quietly. My mother. Every night before she died. I never knew why. I didn't speak. Maybe to remember. Or to forget. Still, I said nothing. He walked toward me slowly, then stopped a few feet away. This house wasn't built for people like you. I frowned. What kind of people am I? He didn't answer right away. The kind who hum when they cook. Who touch picture frames like they matter. The kind who see a garden and want to grow something. I blinked. I don't hum when I cook, I said. You did. Last Tuesday, in the East Kitchen. You thought no one heard. That was the moment. Not grand, not loud, but it shifted something between us. He didn't touch me. Didn't move closer. But his eyes, God, his eyes, were no longer mirrors. They were windows. Slightly open. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. My breath caught. Good, I replied. Neither do I. He exhaled, almost smiled. Almost, then turned. You should sleep, he said. You matter more to this house than you think. And with that, he disappeared down the hallway, barefoot and quiet as a confession. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and looked again at the wedding dress in the closet. It was still untouched, still meaningless, but for the first time I wondered, maybe one day I'd finish it. Sometimes the most powerful things are not said, but seen, in the way someone doesn't leave, in the way they finally look back. There's a particular kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound. It comes from knowing something you were never supposed to know, and waiting for the right moment to admit it. That was the silence that lived in Jonathan's eyes. I didn't see it at first, or maybe I refused to. But that morning, 2 days after our midnight meeting in the gallery, when I entered the study to borrow a book, and found his desk open, papers scattered in an unusual mess, I saw something that made my stomach tighten. There, beneath a stack of ledgers and legal reports, was a copy of the marriage contract. Not the redacted version I had received, but the original, with my signature and my handwriting still faintly, visible from where I'd pressed too hard with the pen. I froze. There was no reason for that version to be here. Not unless I stepped closer. My hands shook, not from fear, but something heavier. Recognition. Betrayal. He had known, all this time. Every silent dinner, every carefully controlled word, every look that hovered somewhere between curiosity and avoidance. He had known that I signed the contract of my own will, that I wasn't forced, that I chose this, and he had said nothing. That night, I waited until the house had gone quiet. Then I knocked on his office door. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Do you always keep copies of contracts?" I asked, my voice even. Jonathan stood behind the desk, sleeves rolled, collar loosened. He didn't answer immediately. Just placed the book he'd been holding down with deliberate care. Only the ones that matter. There was no panic in him, no guilt. Only that same practiced. Calm, like a man used to walking over broken glass with bare feet. I stepped inside. "You knew." He didn't deny it. "You've always known. Since the beginning." Still, nothing. I walked further in, heart pounding. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why let me pretend? Let me carry the weight of a lie I never told but everyone believed?" Jonathan's eyes met mine. Unblinking. Clear. "Because I wanted to see if you would ever say it yourself." That answer knocked the air out of me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He stepped around the desk slowly, stopping a few feet from where I stood. "You came here with your head held high, but inside, you were drowning in guilt. I saw it. Every day. You smiled at the staff. You arranged flowers. In the hallway. You hummed when no one was around. But you never forgave yourself for what you did. What I did," I whispered, "was save my family." "I know." His voice softened. "And it was the bravest thing I've seen in a very long time." That stunned me, more than any accusation could have. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "You think I didn't notice? The way you read every document before you signed it. The way you folded the pages so precisely, like they meant something. That's not how coerced women behave. That's how women with purpose behave." I stood in silence, unsure what to feel. "I wanted to see what kind of woman you were," he said. "Not because I doubted your worth, but because I didn't want to interfere with something that you'd chosen. Even if that choice was me?" He turned, leaned slightly against the window frame. "Especially if that choice was me." Something flickered inside me. Not warmth. Not yet. But the sense of being seen, fully, perhaps for the first time. I crossed my arms. "So what now? You've seen enough?" He shook his head. "No, I've only just started looking." The room quieted again, but this silence, it was different. Not cold, not sharp, just unfinished. Like a song paused mid-note. I left his study without another word. Not angry, not pleased. Just changed. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my room, sketchbook in my lap, staring at the half-finished wedding dress. I'd started drawing years ago. For some reason, I picked up a pencil and began shading in the missing parts. Not for a ceremony, not for a man. Just to remember that there were things I wanted too once. The next morning, there was a small package, outside my door, no note. Inside, a silver thimble, worn but polished. The kind seamstresses used decades ago. A quiet gift, a message without saying a word. I smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Hale Manor, I didn't feel like a ghost passing through. When someone sees your truth, but lets you carry it until you're ready to share it, that is not silence. That is mercy. When I arrived home, the porch light was still off. The screen door creaked the way it always had, high-pitched and stubborn. I stepped inside without knocking, out of habit. The house smelled like cinnamon and thyme, the faint trace of something once warm, now folded into silence. It had been months. The kitchen table was exactly as I'd left it. The chipped mug I used for tea still sat on the shelf. The radio in the corner, long broken, was gathering dust. Nothing had changed. Except me. Mama was asleep on the couch, a quilt wrapped around her legs. Her breathing was shallow but even. Her face, though thinner, still held the quiet grace that had always made people instinctively lower their voices around her. I didn't wake her. I just stood there, watching her chest rise and fall, and wondered how many nights she'd stayed, awake imagining what my life had become. Behind me, the hallway creaked. Noah stood barefoot in a shirt too big, rubbing his eyes. "Gracie?" "Hey, sweetheart." He blinked twice before running into my arms. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the weight of someone who trusted me completely. He was warm. He smelled like soap and pencil shavings. "You're back." "Just for a little while." "Does he know?" I shook my head. "No, not yet." The next morning, Mama made oatmeal like she always had. No questions, no judgment. She didn't even ask why I was home. She just poured me a bowl and passed the honey without a word. We sat at the table like two women who'd lived too long with the consequences of other people's decisions. "You look thinner," she said finally. "So do you." A pause. Then, I heard from the lawyer. My spoon stopped halfway to my mouth. She kept stirring her oatmeal, like she was talking about the weather. "I knew about the contract before you ever told me." My breath caught. "How?" He called. Gave me the same numbers. The same offer. I asked one question. I swallowed. "What did you ask?" "Will she be safe?" Her eyes met mine then. Clear, fierce, familiar. And he said yes. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or betrayed. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because you needed it to be your choice." She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. Her skin was thin, veins visible, but her grip was steady. "You were so used to carrying us. I couldn't add my weight to that. I needed to know you would sign because you believed it was right, not because I looked scared." A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. I felt so alone. "I know," she whispered. "That's how I knew you were doing it for love." Later that day, I sat with Noah under the oak tree in our backyard. He was showing me a drawing of a rocket ship. This one had little people waving from the windows. "This one's going to Mars," he said proudly. "Looks fast." It is. But they're not running away. They're going to start a new place. One with gardens and music and soft beds. I smiled. "That sounds like home." "You could come too." I kissed the top of his head. "I'll think about it." That night, I lay in my old room. The wallpaper was still peeling near the corners. My old lamp still hummed when switched on. And on the nightstand sat a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside, my father's watch, a dried corsage from prom, and a notebook of half-finished poems. Beneath it all, a note in Mama's handwriting I'd never seen before. It was dated a month before the contract. "Grace, you've always had the strength to choose the hard thing. I wish I could take that burden from you, but I know I would only be stealing the pride that comes after. If you ever find yourself alone in a place that was supposed to hold you, remember that silence isn't always emptiness. Sometimes it's just space waiting to be filled with something real." I cried then. Not out of sadness, but out of something deeper. Release. For the first time, I understood that my mother's silence wasn't absence. It was permission. Permission to be the woman I needed to be, even if it meant letting her go. The next morning, I stood at the window with a cup of tea and asked myself a question I'd avoided for months. Do I want to go back? And somewhere inside me the answer rose, soft but clear. Yes. Not because I owed him anything, not because it was written in a contract, but because he hadn't tried to hold me, and somehow, that had made me want to stay. Sometimes love is not proven by how hard someone tries to keep you, but by how gently they let you go when they know they shouldn't. I didn't tell him I was coming back. There was no phone call, no letter, this time. No formal arrangement or scheduled return. I simply packed a small bag and boarded the train at dawn, wrapped in the same gray coat I'd worn the day I left. The ride back was quiet. The windows were fogged with condensation. My fingers traced the edge of the ticket for no reason, except to calm the rhythm of my pulse. I wasn't nervous, just uncertain. And oddly, that was comforting. Uncertainty meant the choice was mine. When the taxi pulled into the gravel driveway of Hale Manor, the house looked exactly as I'd left it, imposing, still, elegant, but not cold anymore, just quiet. I stood outside for a moment, my hand resting on the gate. The same white chrysanthemums still bloomed along the front path. Someone had kept them alive. I had a feeling I knew who, me. Front door opened before I knocked. It wasn't Jonathan. It was Mrs. Lee, the housekeeper. She didn't say anything, just smiled softly and stepped aside, like she'd been waiting. I stepped inside, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since I left. There was no sign of him at first. The house was still and stillness itself. Not empty, just respectfully waiting. I set my bag down by the staircase and walked toward the east wing. In my room, still untouched, I found something resting on the windowsill. A box. Wrapped in simple parchment, no ribbon, no card. Inside, a piece of fabric. Ivory silk, and beneath it, folded carefully, was a sketch. My wedding dress. But not the version I'd abandoned. This one was completed. Every line drawn with care, every detail finished in ink and pencil. I stared at it, stunned. He had found my old drawings. He had seen them. And without saying a word, he had finished what I could not. A quiet offering. A way of saying, I see you, even when you don't say anything. I turned when I heard footsteps behind me. He stood in the doorway. No suit today, just a sweater, sleeves pushed up, expression unreadable. You came back, he said. Not as a question, but as a fact. I did. We stood in silence, that familiar kind, not the cold one, but the kind that waits. Why? He asked. I could have said many things. That I missed the tea, the space, the quiet. But I told the truth. Because you didn't ask me to. He didn't react, just looked at me like he was still trying to understand something he didn't believe he deserved. I thought I'd failed, he admitted. When you left. You didn't. But I didn't try to stop you. That's why I came back, walked slowly into the room, keeping space between us like he always had. I wasn't sure if I had the right. To ask me to stay? To be anything more than a placeholder in your story. That broke something soft in me. I moved closer. Not all the way, but enough that our words didn't have to cross oceans. You were never a placeholder, Jonathan. I just didn't know how to be seen without disappearing. He looked at the sketch again, then back at me. I finished it because I hoped. Someday you'd finish it for real. I nodded, eyes stinging. Think I'd like to try. He didn't rush forward. He didn't kiss me or pull me into some cinematic embrace. He simply sat down at the small bench near the window, looked up at me, and said, Then stay. Not as my wife, not as a name on a page, but as Grace. Just Grace? I asked, half smiling. That's all I've ever wanted. We had dinner that night in the kitchen. Not the formal dining room, just the simple, narrow kitchen where the pans were slightly dented and the table was too small. He let me cook. I insisted. We didn't talk much. But he watched me as I moved, like he was memorizing something sacred. And maybe in some quiet way, he was. Afterward, we sat by the fire. He didn't touch me, but he didn't look away. Before going upstairs, I paused beside him. Jonathan. Yes? I'm pregnant. He blinked once, took a breath, nodded slowly. Is it yours? I said gently. Silence again. And then he reached for my hand, very slowly, like asking permission with every inch. I gave it. He held it between his, looked down at it. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a mother. He smiled. Just barely. Maybe we figure it out together. That night, I slept in my room, but the air was warmer. The sheets didn't feel foreign. And when I opened the drawer of the nightstand, I found a cup of herbal tea still warm. No note, just steam curling like a promise. Not all loves start with fire. Some begin with patience, with silence. With a door left unlocked, and a cup of tea that says, I'm here if you want to come back. The next morning, he was already in the kitchen when I came down. No suit. Just jeans and a faded gray shirt that made him look, for once, like someone who didn't live behind glass walls and shareholder meetings. He was trying, clumsily, to make pancakes. And failing. There was batter on the counter, a pan too hot, and a plate of lopsided attempts that looked more like maps than meals. I stood there in the doorway, watching him. For a man who once signed million-dollar deals before breakfast, this felt oddly heroic. You're burning them, I said softly. He didn't look up. I Googled a recipe. It lied. I smiled, walked in, gently nudged him aside, and turned down the heat. Cooking isn't about precision. It's about attention. I'm learning. You're trying, I corrected. That's different, and better. We ate together on the back patio. It was a quiet morning, clouds shifting slowly above the trees, the scent of early spring beginning to mix with leftover winter. There were birds, somewhere out of sight, and beside me, a man who wasn't asking for forgiveness or reward, just presence. Do you want it? Do you want? I asked finally. He looked up. The child? The life, the noise, the mess. A pause. He looked at his plate, then back at me. I want whatever comes from you. His voice didn't shake, not because I feel entitled to it, or because a contract says I should, but because I think if something grows out of you, it must be something good. I didn't speak for a moment. There were no fireworks in that sentence, no grand declaration, just quiet, unwavering trust. The kind I never knew I needed until I heard it. Later that afternoon, I found him in the greenhouse. I didn't know he had one. Hidden at the far end of the estate, behind a row of hedges, was a small, sun-dappled building filled with pots, soil, and herbs arranged in imperfect rows. He was watering rosemary when I stepped inside. I started this when I couldn't sleep, he said, not turning around. It helped. You garden? No. I fail at gardening. But I try. I walked closer, slowly. The air smelled of earth, mint, and something warm I couldn't name. I used to help my mom grow things, I said. She called it a form of prayer. Then I guess I've been praying, he said. He turned to face me. For forgiveness. For grace. I blinked. That's my name, I said. I know. He stepped forward, hesitated, then gently placed his hand on my belly. Not possessive. Not hesitant. Just reverent. I don't want to be the man I was, he said. You're not, I whispered. Not anymore. He didn't cry. Jonathan Hale never cried. But his shoulders relaxed in a way I'd never seen before. Like he finally believed he was allowed to stop holding the world together. That evening, he brought me a chair from the attic. Rocker old, but sturdy. He set it by the window in my room. Didn't say why, but I knew. It would be for the nights to come. The ones with lullabies and teething. The ones where love wasn't poetic but persistent. I'm not afraid of the hard parts, I told him. I am, he replied. but I'm staying anyway. I found myself writing again that night. Not contracts, not sketches, but a letter. To the child not yet born. My little one, you weren't planned. Not in the way people use that word. But you were chosen, again and again, by a mother who gave up her pride to protect you, by a father who gave up his walls to make room for you. You are not a line in a deal or a result of duty. You are the beginning of something neither of us saw coming, something that taught us how to choose each other, even when we were scared. When you ask one day what kind of love made you, know this. It was the quiet kind, the patient kind, the kind that doesn't shout but endures, and you were worth all of it. Mom, he never read that letter. It was never meant for him. But somehow, the next morning, a small note appeared on my desk, Jonathan's handwriting. I don't know how to father a child. But if they learn from you, they'll be just fine. Thank you for coming back. J. There are promises we speak aloud. And then there are the ones made in gestures, in pauses, in two people choosing to begin again, when it would have been easier not to. 1 year later, the house was no longer quiet in the way it used to be. It still stood tall on its foundation, all glass and angles and carefully sculpted trees. But there were signs of life now. Soft shoes left near the door, wildflowers in a chipped vase, and music drifting faintly from a record player someone had finally dusted off. The nursery sat in what used to be the study. Light poured in through sheer curtains. The room smelled of lavender, baby powder, and something sweeter, like the beginning of something unspoiled. Jonathan had painted the walls himself. Badly. There were uneven strokes, a drip stain near the window, and a smudge shaped like a thumbprint near the baseboard. I never corrected him. He called it imperfect. I called it proof. Our daughter, Emma, was barely 3 months old. She looked like him, mostly. But sometimes, when she cried with that soft, wrinkled brow, I saw flashes of my mother. She was fussy in the mornings, gentle in the afternoons, and always, always calmed when Jonathan held her at exactly 7 hours p.m., humming a tune he swore he didn't know. He claimed he wasn't a singer, but her sighs disagreed. We never had a second wedding. There were no rings exchanged. No cake, no photographs. Just a quiet afternoon, 1 month after Emma was born, when I sat on the porch with a mug of tea and Jonathan came outside carrying a box. Inside it, the thimble he'd once given me, a small bundle of rosemary from the greenhouse, in the original copy of our contract, torn neatly in half. He sat beside me, didn't say a word. He just placed the box between us and leaned back, eyes closed against the sun. That was our ceremony, and I've never needed more. I opened my dress shop that spring. Nothing fancy, just a corner space in town with wooden floors and sun-warmed windows. I didn't advertise. I didn't have to. The first customer came in because she heard a baby crying through the backroom curtain and said, "Anyone who can sew and rock a cradle at the same time must be worth trusting." Jonathan dropped me off every morning at 9. He never said goodbye, just placed a hand on my shoulder before I stepped out, his way of saying, "I'll be here when you're done." Some evenings, I'd come home to find him in the kitchen, still burning things, still refusing help. But now he laughed about it, not loudly, not often, but enough. One night, I found a book beside my pillow. It wasn't wrapped, just left there. A simple journal, blank pages, and inside the cover, one line written in his hand. If silence was how we began, maybe this is how we continue. I cried. Because in all my life, no one had ever listened to me as quietly as he had, and no one had ever spoken so loudly, without raising his voice. Now each morning begins the same. Jonathan brews coffee. I make tea. Emma babbles to the ceiling fan as if it holds the universe. And at exactly 7 a.m., he places a mug beside me. No sugar, 1 squeeze of lemon, just as he's done every day since the morning I came back. He never forgets. And I never remind him. Sometimes love doesn't need anniversaries or declarations. Sometimes it's a thimble on a windowsill, a rocking chair by a crib, a contract torn and left behind. A promise made in silence doesn't vanish. It grows, slowly, quietly, until one day you wake up and realize your life has been shaped by it. I don't know if Emma will understand that kind of love when she's older. Maybe she'll want fireworks, speeches, romance with noise and color. And maybe she'll get it. But if not, I hope she finds someone who looks at her the way her father looked at me the night I told him I wasn't leaving again. Not because I was afraid of being alone, but because I'd finally found someone who was brave enough to stand beside me in the quiet. People ask sometimes, what changed? I don't know if I have a good answer. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. All I know is this. The man who once offered me a contract now offers me a cup of tea every morning, and that, I think, is the real vow. I don't need a ring. I don't need a ceremony. I just need him here, every day, sitting beside me, even in silence. That's what I call forever. If this story touched you in any way, if you found yourself pausing, remembering, or even just breathing a little deeper, consider giving it a like. And if you'd like more stories like this, quiet, honest, and full of heart, feel free to subscribe. There's always more to come. Thank you for spending your time here. It means more than you know.